Steve was dead for 2 days before we started talking about moving his body. Some of us didn't want to. We were worried about the neighbors seeing us. We were worried about the cops. We were worried about his gross. But in the end, we all decided we had to do something. It was January, gray and snowy outside, with a weak light that barely managed to penetrate into the house. Even at noon, it was still dark. The streetlights were on, and shadows flickered in their artificial glow. It was like the sun had died and we were living in the end times, the last residents of a dying earth. We all came to the house in different ways. Some saw it in dreams. Some read the address in fractured numbers of spam calls. Some heard the street names whispered at night, although when we woke up, there was no one in the room. I wrote the address down one night before I fell asleep. The next morning, puzzled by the address of a street I've never heard of and a city and state that I've never been in, I showed the note to my brother. Looking at it, he frowned and asked me who had written it. Me, I told him. He stared at it for a minute and shook his head. That's not your handwriting. Even then, the house was tracing its outlines inside of me. A week later, I shaved my head and left my hair spiraled down the sink. Then I stole money from my brother. Not a lot, just enough for a bus ticket. I left a note that didn't say where I was going, just that I had to go somewhere. When I got there, I knew I was in the right place. The ruined houses and dead-end streets seemed to hum to me. Trees grew out of the roofs of abandoned row houses. The streetlights buzzed on and off. The house loomed, alone against the darkening sky. The windows were broken, victim of neighborhood children throwing rocks. There were no lights on in it. There were no signs of life. But we knew. The door was unlocked and I walked in, pausing as a smell hit me. Something rotten, old, diseased, but under that, I was breathing hard, sweating, my heart pounding against my chest. I felt like you do when you open the door to a bedroom of someone you're about to kiss for the first time. I licked my lips and stepped in. Most of us were already there. A few would still be coming. There were no lights, but the glow from the room with the closed door lit the empty room. Everyone sat on the bare wooden floor, legs crossed under them. The air throbbed, like a pulse inside of me that somehow became external. "Welcome home," they all said together, and I said it too. Welcome home. What was behind the closed door glowed even harder. We would go in, each of us once a day. The first time I went in, I could barely breathe. The girl who sat behind me came back from it, walking slowly, stains still around her lips, and whispered to me it was my turn. I walked and opened the door. No one noticed us for weeks. The broken streets were desolate. There was no reason to be there. There had been fires years ago, and all the people had moved out. The city talked of bulldozing the homes, but never did. Nothing empty stays empty. And all the dark and wet, things grew. New life began. In the night, we ran fevers. I saw some of us sweat, watched drool run from open mouths, and saw the webbing in between fingers grow thicker and denser. We were turning. We never left, never turned on lights. We can see in the dark, but we weren't even seeing the old world anymore. We had a new vision, new colors to see. We thought we can stay forever, as every day a new one would join us, lulled by dreams, by taste, by strange visions compelling them from television sets. We would grow in the dark. We would devour and slowly spread. A new person arrived and someone saw. We didn't know, but someone had watched them walk down the empty streets into the empty house. They told someone else who told someone else who told someone else. The big house with the broken windows, they whispered to each other. The one where that guy killed his family 20 years ago. People are living there. They started to watch. We could tell. We didn't need to see. The glow from them at the edges told us. The ones who were changing the most moved to the middle of the room so their slow lumbering bodies would be hidden if someone looked in. What was behind the door said not to worry. We felt tendrils squirm inside of us. One of us, one night, cut their stomach, and no blood came out. They pushed aside their skin. Inside of them, the beautiful growth bloomed, white and fruited and bright with a sticky dripping wetness. We reached out and touched them. They moved under our hands. Steve was the first to die. He was one of the ones that had changed the most. The growths were starting to push against his skin from the inside. His eyes had gone foggy and white with webbing, so he kept them closed. When he opened his mouth, you could see the stems and bulbs in his throat, on his tongue. It was hard for him to breathe, and we watched him. His chest rose and fell. His neck was thick with blossoms inside of it. And then he stopped breathing. We tried to feed him to the room, but it didn't want him. He was part of it. The growth did not eat the growth. We all understood. We all were starting to understand a new kingdom was dawning. A new world was beginning. We looked outside and saw there were people standing with flashlights watching us. We let the night pass and let the cold morning come. The morning passed and the afternoon, and at some point the watchers left and I, who was the least changed, carried Steve away. I knew to take him to a new house, to bury him in a new room, and to let him eat the wood and rot. The watchers appeared when I was close to a new nest. They ran at me, screaming. I knew they would kill me, but I knew they were scared of me, scared of all of us. I dropped Steve on the ground. When they saw him, what his face looked like, his hands, they screamed. But it wasn't a scream of anger, of threats, of violence. It was only terror, complete and absolute terror. I ran from them into the warrens of abandoned buildings and streets, and they lost me in the desolate emptiness. I don't think they wanted to find me. I think they wanted to forget I ever existed. I found an old apartment building and made my way to the 10th floor. There, peering down, I watched them set Steve on fire. I saw the lights illuminate their faces. The fire burned orange and red on the white snow-streaked streets. The crowd moved to the house. They threw bottles with lit rags into open windows, and the fire began erupting. Snow was falling, on and off, hesitant and dirty white. The fire took hold and began to turn the house into more fire. The watchers stood and watched. I thought of the room. I thought of the first time I walked in. The smell in there was so thick. The fungus was everywhere. Flowered and white and blooming, it covered the walls and the ceiling. The floors were soft and weak under my feet. There were so many colors in it. Bright green and deep reds. Magnetic oranges and strange shimmering iridescent greens. Those colors all hinted at something beyond vision. A new spectrum. The smell was overwhelming. We always went into the room alone, but if there had been someone with me, I would have grabbed their arm. The scent of it, a deep rotten odor, made me weak. I dropped to my knees. The mushrooms were like a field of hallucinatory technicolor flowers. They moved to a breeze that wasn't there. I touched one. It was rubbery and felt warm in my hands. I picked it off the ground and bit. It squirmed in my mouth and I gasped. There was an electricity in my head. I swallowed it and dipped my head, biting the beauty's growth. I heard it talk to me. I heard it say, "This is a new world. This is a new world." Watching the house burn from the 10th floor, some of us staggered out into the streets, strains and beautiful growths erupting from their foreheads, on fire and dying, but most stayed in. The fire roared, and I saw when it hit the room, a noise like an explosion, and then a bright cloud of white rose from the house and spread into the dark, cold air. It looked like snowflakes. The spores were everywhere, lifted by the cold winds off the dark lake to high above the city, spreading into lungs, into houses, into all the wet and secret places. Growing, growing and growing, sprouting tendrils and twisting new life into every spot it could. The watchers walked away. The fire died. On the wind, above us, and inside us, the spores lived. A new life was beginning.